Vamos a empezar. All right. My name is Marco Antonio Borges Gonzalez, to give you my full name. As you probably know, a lot of the Spanish culture, we use our mother's name and our father's name both for our last name. So that happens to be, generally, in the U.S., we typically just use one, so I use my father's name, which is Borges. So I'm a meteorologist with the National Weather Service. So let me tell you a little bit about me. I'm from Nicaragua. I was born in Nicaragua. So let me jump around. Maybe, if I do it correctly. So I was born in Nicaragua, Managua, and I came to the United States back in 1978. And at that time, I was actually younger than probably all of you. I had just turned 11 years old when I came to the United States. I left Nicaragua because there was a war going on. And at that time, like I said, I'm from Managua, the capital, but at that time when I left, all the fighting was kind of in other cities, away in the mountains, up in the mountains where all the rebels and all of those people that were fighting could go and hide. But the war just kept getting closer and closer and closer to the capital city. So that's when my parents felt that me and my siblings, we were in danger. So they sent us, we had family in the United States, so they sent us to live with our family. At that time, I didn't know actually how long I was going to be in the United States. At first I had a 3-month visa. So it's like, hey, you're going on a 3-month vacation. School had just ended, and it's like, okay, hey, sounds like a nice thing to do. Go to the United States, check out, see the families, check out the places in the United States, and after 3 months, you probably head back, or not. Well, that was back in 1978, and I haven't gone back. So it was more than 3 months, it turns out. So the war did make it into the city. There was a big revolution. There was a dictator when I left. So they were able to remove him from power, and then we had elections, and things changed after that for a while. So I came to Buffalo, New York. So from the tropics, where it's beautiful, warm weather, to the tropics, from the tropics to Buffalo, New York. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Buffalo and anybody know what Buffalo is famous for?
No.
Say again? You don't know?
Wings.
Yeah, besides the wings, Buffalo wings are awesome, but the other thing they're famous for is snow. We get like tons and tons of snow. So I went from the tropics to a place that's really cold, and I had never experienced that before. So that was kind of quite a change, a life change for me actually. So I was there. I finished my schooling there, and then there in Buffalo. Actually, the nice thing about Buffalo is that it's an old city, so there's a lot of Buffalo's by the Great Lakes. So there's a lot of the history of Buffalo. It had a lot of people from different parts of the world. A lot of Europeans, a lot of people from throughout Europe, throughout Russia, and throughout the world. There were a lot of people out there in Buffalo. So it was kind of like a little sample of the old world, because you had people from everywhere. So anyway, I went to school there, I graduated from high school there, and then I joined the Air Force. So my joke is I joined the Air Force, I wanted to see the world, so they sent me to the center of the world. They sent me to North Dakota. So I spent a lot of years up in North Dakota. Remember, I'm from the tropics, and they keep saying, I spent many years up where it's super cold. So I was in the Air Force for 4 years. Then I went to school, and I got a degree in meteorology. I got a degree in aviation also. And then I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I wanted to be an airline pilot at one time. I wanted to be also a meteorologist at one time, and I didn't know which way, what I wanted to do. So I decided to do the meteorology. And so I went to school up in the University of North Dakota. And from then, that's when I joined the Weather Service. I've been in the Weather Service for over 20 years now. And I also, with a degree in aviation, with the Weather Service, that's where I've done a lot of aviation-focused training. So what I do now is I'm a trainer. I'm an instructor. Here in Kansas City, we bring meteorologists from all the National Weather Service meteorologists. They come to Kansas City for different type of training. So I train pretty much most of them when they come here. So fast forward, here I am now. So I've taken a long journey, a lot of years in the United States. I have now 40 years since I left Nicaragua, thinking that I was going to go back someday, and I didn't. Let's see, I can't read that, but it's about, if you were to, you actually could drive down to Managua from here, and 60 hours of driving time, according to that, and about 3,000 miles from here. So kind of just a little interesting fact. But the topic today, so let me jump around back again, is Spanish language in the workplace, right? That's kind of why we're here. So I'm going to get comfortable and I'm going to sit down and tell you about some of my experiences. So before I was a meteorologist, when I was going to school and when I was in the military, I used to work at a hospital. And in the hospital, that's when I first experienced that actually knowing Spanish was a good thing. That's where I was an X-ray tech. So I used to take a lot of X-rays of people that came in and they were hurt. So a lot of them were people that only spoke Spanish. So that's when I first realized, oh wow, that's when doctors and nurses were calling me over. It's like, Marco, we need your help. Can you help us translate this or translate that? So that's where I first realized that, hey, that's actually something that people want. It's somebody to speak Spanish to help out, because otherwise you're not going to be able to take care of that patient because they cannot communicate what's wrong with them. And the one thing that from all those experiences when I was in the hospital, one stands out, very clear in my head. It's one time at the hospital that I worked at, this person needed to go to a medical center that was an hour away. So, and actually it was a woman that was having a baby. And so I had to ride in the ambulance with them for that whole hour. And here's this woman kind of trying to have a baby, having complications. They need to get her to this big hospital so make sure the mom and the child was fine. But they needed to be talking to her the whole way. So that's where the first time that's like, oh my gosh, knowing Spanish is really, really helping somebody quite a bit to make sure that they do what they need to do for the health and the health of their baby. That was the first time that kind of shocked me. That's like, wow, it's important to know. It was nice to know a different language, and that people were actually coming to me and asking for help on that. Other times that I used it, as a meteorologist, and especially in the last few years that I've been here in Kansas City, since we teach all of the meteorologists throughout the nation that belong to the Weather Service, when there's things like a hurricane, it doesn't just come to the United States. It might go through the Caribbean, it might go through Central America. It might, it's going to affect more than just the United States. So sometimes when that happens, meteorologists from other countries, like from example Mexico, they might, those meteorologists, they talk to our meteorologists, and then they have conference calls they exchange information on, hey, where do you think this hurricane is going to hit? how much damage, and how can we warn the people. So, so that's kind of when when I came here, that's when I realized that, once again, my other set of skills that I normally don't use otherwise, that were valuable. So also there was, it's called the World Meteorological Organization. That's, it's, meteorologists from throughout the world. And in fact, here's this interesting book that I have here. Super heavy. This from the World Meteorological Organization. Every single meteorology word, it's right here, and it's written in a number of languages. It's written in English, of course, in French, in Russian, and in Espanol. So it's pretty cool. So you could ask me like any word that's a meteorology word, I could look it up, and then I can tell it to you, or well, I could show you that it's in 3 other languages besides English. So that's but I worked with them a couple of years ago. I worked with them. They were doing some training for their meteorologists in Spain, and they needed to make sure that their training was correct. They had already translated for Spanish for them, but they wanted somebody to, double check and make sure that all the training was correct. So I pulled out this book and make sure that all the terminology was correct and everything else was, was good to go. So that was a very interesting project that I worked on. The other thing that the Weather Service is doing, especially with the last hurricanes that came through the United States, and not Michael, but the Florence, the one before that, they hit the Carolinas. There's a lot of Spanish people, speakers in the Carolinas, and throughout, obviously, Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas. So there's this here that it had information on where the hurricane was going to hit and what kind of impacts it was going to affect them. So, but it was in English. And the problem was that you had all of these people that only spoke Spanish that we need to let them, we need to warn them, we need to let them know that they're in danger too. So this team, and sorry for, I keep going back and forth. So this team of Spanish people throughout the Weather Service, they say, you know what? When you have the product like this in English, we could take it and we could translate it, and then you could bring it back to your local people in Spanish, and then they could get all the information that we're giving to the English speakers. So here's the version in Spanish. It says, El peligroso huracán Florence trae impactos que amenazarán la vida, and that means that Hurricane Florence is bringing a lot of impacts that are going to threaten life. So, and then it goes and explains what's going to happen, and then some of the messages, like what are the things that you need to remember to do. Kind of like when you hear here, the National Weather Service has issued a tornado warning for the following counties. And they name the counties and they say, take shelter now. Go to the safest place or the most interior room. You heard all that, right? I've been living here long enough. Well, those people in Spanish, they don't know. They hear that in English and it's like, okay, what? What now? So we have a group of Spanish speakers that translate it, so they also get that information and they too could take cover and take the proper thing to do. So that's kind of what I've got. That's the rundown of where I came from, how I got here, and that in reality, there's some of us that are able to speak multiple languages, and we use it in our jobs. Before that, though, before I left Nicaragua, I wanted to also mention, actually, when I was in Nicaragua, I took a couple years of French. That's kind of what I wanted to learn. I always dream of going to France, and I wanted to be a French speaker. But then when I came to the United States, that was pretty complicated. remembering the French that I had learned for 2 years, and obviously I was a Spanish speaker, and then trying to learn English, I got really confused. That was really hard. So I kind of stopped learning French for a while and tried to learn the English until I kind of got better at it. But then in high school, I brought it back and I took 3 years of French. So, which actually was pretty helpful because when I was in the medical field, a lot of those Latin terms that you see in medicine, they come from French, Spanish, and all of those Romance languages that they call. So the rest of the time, I'll open up the room for questions. Anybody have questions?
Did you take English classes when you were living in Nicaragua?
No.
So your first English was when you came to the U.S.?
Yes, yes. So what they did, so I came to the United States and I started 6th grade in the United States. I had finished 5th grade there. So my Spanish, I always think of it as I'm a 5th grader when it comes to me speaking Spanish, because that's when I stopped my formal education to come to the United States. So a lot of my words, I sound like a 5th grader. So when I talk to my mom, that's the funny part. It's like, oh, I'm still her little kid. I'm the baby of the family. So what I did when I came to the United States and I started school, every single day for an hour, I went to special class to learn English. So every single day, besides all of my the math and all the sciences and all the other courses, I had to go to the special class. And I did that for 2 years until I was fluent enough to be able to be in a normal class.
What questions do you guys have? So is your name as an author on that book? Your name is in print?
No. Actually, that book has been around for a long time, so no, I'm not. I use it as a reference, but I'm not an author of that book.
Okay.
I do have some things for you. Wendy is going to help me pass along some. So as Wendy passes this around, I'll tell you what this is. Who wants to take a guess and tell me what this side of this sheet, what does that say at the top? Las nubes. Yes. Introduction to the clouds. So all the clouds, every single cloud that we see outside has a name, actually, has an official name. So in this sheet on the left-hand side, it's got all of the different types, their official name in Spanish. On the far right, it's got what we call the water cycle. I don't know if you guys have ever studied the water cycle. I expect actually all of you to have studied the water cycle. So all of you should be able to, even if you, here's the thing that sometimes when you don't know Spanish, or when you don't know a different language and somebody's talking to you, and you might not get every single word that that person says, but the way that you could understand them is by saying, okay, if we're talking about the water cycle, and I know a little bit about the water cycle already, so if they say something like, el ciclo del agua de la tierra, it's like, okay, water cycle. Agua is water, tierra is land. Oh yeah, so I start to understand what people are saying because I already have some knowledge of that. So that's a trick for you when you're testing when you're doing any type of communicating in not only in this, not only within a foreign language, but even in other topics, that try to understand what people are saying by just listening, being a good listener and saying, oh yeah, I know half of what was said, and then the other half I could have an educated guess on what that meant, just because you know the topic. So having said that, you guys probably could translate el siglo del agua de la tierra. Right? Who wants to translate any of those words? I'm going to give this table one of those words translated for me. And how do you say it? Very good. Now, how do you say it in Spanish? Precipitación. Very good. All right. And then this table. Pick one more. All right. So how do you say it in Spanish? Evaporación. And please note that when you see there's an accent, you guys have learned about the accent, right? So whenever there's an accent, that should be the emphasis on that word. So in those, anytime that there's that accent right there, make sure that that's where you emphasize. So that's why it would be evaporización. How about this table? And what does that mean? Right, so it's transporting, right? That's where you're moving that water from one place to another. So transporte. Very good. So how about this table here? Absolutely, yes. El consumo de planta. So how about this table? We already had that one. A new one. That's what is, yes. 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 How about this table? And how do you say it in Spanish? Say it one more time. Condensación. Very good. Very good. And this table. See, where is we're on the water cycle, so let's pick one more from the water cycle and translate it. So now what does that mean? Do you want to do another one? And I'll put on short. Very good. And then the last thing that I have is the back. On the back, once again. Every single cloud in the sky has an official name. So in the back, we've got just about every official name of the clouds. And underneath it's got a little explanation of what that cloud would look like. Any questions? All right. Well, muchas gracias.
Thank you so much. Aplaudan, guys.